Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is part 61 of ASP.NET Core tutorial. In this video, I will introduce logging capabilities in ASP.NET Core. Before we write any logging code or configuration, let's look at the default logging that we get out of the box with ASP.NET Core. To understand that, I'm going to run this project that we have been working with so far in this video in debug mode by clicking this run button. There we go. We have our application up and running. There we go. We have our application up and running. Now, if we take a look at the output window, now if we take a look at the output window within Visual Studio. By the way, if the output window is not present here, for you to open this, click debug, window and output. Notice within the output window here, we have a lot of information dumped by the process employee management.exe, and if we scroll all the way down, again we have a lot of information, a lot of messages here related to the thread. Thread has exited with code 0. Thread has exited with code 0. At the moment, we are running our project using the out-of-process hosting model. At the moment, we are running our project using the out-of-process hosting model. So if we take a look at our project file, csproj file, notice we are using out-of-process. So here is the csproj file. You can also get this csproj file by double clicking at employee management project. Notice we are using out of process. So the process that is dumping all this information here, the process that is dumping all this information here is employee management.exe. If you have used in process hosting model, then instead of employee management.exe, you would see IIS express.exe, dumping all this information right here. Let me tell you the difference between in process and out of process. Why ASP.NET Core hosting model is missing? If you are configuring, if is missing, actually I have manually added this line ASP.NET Core hosting model out of process. Okay, if you are configuring in process versus out of process hosting for IIS in .NET 8, the default hosting model is in process. If you don't explicitly set it, the project assumes in process hosting. That is why you don't see ASP this line, ASP.NET Core hosting out of process unless you manually add it. One more thing is that why we don't see migration in CS Proj file. When you run .NET Entity Framework migration add, Entity Framework code generates migration classes .cs plus designer.cs inside migration folder. These files are just normal CS source files. By default, the SDK style project SDK is equal to Microsoft.NET.SDK web automatically includes all .cs files in the project directory and subfolders. Because this implicit inclusion, you don't see compile include is equal to migration entries in your C proj file. They are included automatically. No need to list them. In older .NET Framework project, non-SDK style, every file had to be explicitly listed in .cs proj file. That is why you might expect migration to show up. But in .NET 5 plus SDK style project, it is automatic. Okay, guys. Now what? So, if you have used in-process hosting model, then what would happen in hosted? If we have used in-process hosting model, then instead of employee management.exe, you would see IIS express.exe. express.exe, dumping all this information right here. Dumping all this information right here. To prevent all these messages being logged to the output window within Visual Studio, we can click on tools. Options, output window, in the debugging, expand the debugging and go to the output window. I'm going to turn off all these messages being logged to the output window. So turn them one by one. Turn them off one by one. Turn them off one by one. Okay. After turning off them, click the OK button. So we have turned off all the messages, all these messages being logged to the output window. So click OK. And now stop debugging. Stop debugging, and then let's run the project again in debug mode. First, save the changes and build the solution, and then let's run the project again in debug mode. Build succeeded. So run the project in debug mode. Now if we take a look at the output window again, now if we take a look at the output window, now if we take a look at the output window again, notice we don't have anything logged here. We don't have anything logged here. Let me stop debugging. Let me stop debugging again. In our application configuration file, that is in this appsettings.json file, I am going to include another logged level setting. I am going to include another logged level settings. These log level settings are related to logging configuration. We will discuss log level. We will discuss log level in detail in our upcoming videos. For now, I am going to include another category here. For now, I am going to include another category here, Microsoft, and set this to information log level. With this setting in place, we are basically saying all the information logs and higher that are coming from the Microsoft category must be logged and displayed. We will discuss this log level. Configuration in detail in our upcoming videos. For now, let's run our project in debug mode again and see the behavior that we get. But first of all, we need to save the changes that we made and build the solution. Build succeeded, and let's run our project in debug mode again and see the behavior that we get. If we take a look at the output window, we have a lot of information logged. Notice we have a lot of information logged. The first part here that we see is the category. The first part here that we see is the category of the log, and notice it starts with the word Microsoft, and this is an information log, and the log message is request starting. That is because we basically said we want all the information level. We want all the information level logs and higher from the Microsoft category, and we see several logs here, including the select query, including the select query that is issued by entity framework core to retrieve the list of employees, to retrieve the list of employees that we see on this web page. At the moment we are running this project from Visual Studio. At the moment we are running this project from Visual Studio in debug mode, and we see all those logged messages displayed in the debug output window. ASP.NET Core is cross-platform, and we can run this same project even from the command line. So let's stop debugging within Visual Studio. And then launch command prompt as an administrator. In the command prompt window, change the path to the folder that contains your project. So change the path, and to see the path, change the path to the folder that contains your project. To see the path of our project, go to the Visual Studio, Solution Explorer, right click on Solution and open folder in File Explorer. So open this, go inside this employee management. This is the path of our project. So copy this and go to the command prompt. Okay. So in my case, the project is present in C:\user /del /desktop /part44 add singleton versus add scope versus add transient /employee management. Within that we have another folder with the same name /employee management, which is our project folder. This is our project folder right here. So press enter. Now what? Right here, run the command .NET run to run our .NET project. So hit enter. We have our application up and running, and it is listening for incoming request, at this URL localhost 5298. So localhost colon 5298. Hit enter. We have our application up and running, and it is listening for incoming requests at this URL localhost colon 5298. So in the browser address bar, let's navigate to, we have already navigated to localhost 5298. There we go. We have our list of employees here. Now what? Now if we take a look at the console window, where is the console window? If we take a look at the console window, notice we have a lot of information log, just like the debug window in Visual Studio. The category name here starts with word Microsoft. Start with the word Microsoft. The log level is info. And we also have the SQL query. And we also have the SQL query issued by Entity Framework Core. We also have the SQL query issued by Entity Framework Core to retrieve the list of employees. Now the point that I am trying to make is we did not write any code. Now the point that I am trying to make is we did not write any code except this one line of configuration. Except this one line of configuration right here to have these log information. To have these log information. To have these logs displayed. To have these logs displayed on the console window. If we are running the project from the command line, running the project from the command line, and in the debug output window, if we are running the project from Visual Studio in debug mode. Okay. And in the debug output window, if we are running the project from Visual Studio in debug mode. So how are these logs displayed? Well, we have something called logging provider. And these logging providers physically store or display logs. For example, we have console logging provider. This provider displays logs on a console. If we are running the project from command line. Similarly, we have debug logging provider. This provider displays logs on the debug window in Visual Studio if we are running the project in Visual Studio in debug mode. Now in our previous video, in this series, we discussed the significance of the main method. Now in our previous videos in this series. Now let me first highlight this line for you. Now in the previous video, in this video series, we discussed the significance of the main method in this program.cs file. But here in our program.cs file, we don't see the main method, because in new style .NET version 6.7.8, the new minimal hosting model introduced in .NET 6 and used in .NET 8, you don't see a main method. That is because the compiler generates one for you behind the scene. This line is effectively inside an implicit is effectively inside an implicit main method. The compiler synthesizes the main method at the build time, so the entry point still exists. It is just hidden. So the role of main method is played by the top level statement in your program.cs file. This line web application dot create builder. This line web application dot create builder args replaces both older version. So let me show you the older version. This is the older version. So this line web application dot create builder args replaces both older version method create web host builder and create default builder and create default builder. Now this line web application dot create builder args setups the host like create web host builder did. Set up the host like create web host builder did. It also applies the default configuration. This line also applies the default configuration. Like create default builder did. So this single method call. This single method call is doing the combined work. This single method call variable builder is equal to web application dot create builder args is doing the combined work of create web host builder plus create default builder, and replacement of build and dot run method is here for build method. Now we have this line. Variable app builder dot build, which creates the web application, and here is run method, and here is run method. And here is run method. At the moment we are on the official ASP.NET Core GitHub page. Okay. So go to the GitHub page. So open the Google Chrome. And open the navigate to GitHub. Yeah. Hit enter. So at the moment we are on the official ASP.NET Core GitHub page using the search box that we have right here. I have searched for this create default builder method. In this repo. And at the moment we are looking at web host, and at the moment we are looking at webhost.cs file. And if you scroll down, notice if you scroll down, notice we have the create default builder method. Notice we have the create default builder method right here, and you can see this method configure our application configuration, and you can see this method where is the method? And you can see this method configure our application configuration, and this method configure our application configuration. And if we scroll down a bit further, And if we scroll down a bit further, notice it also configure logging. As part of this logging configuration, notice it is looking for logging. Notice it is looking for logging related setting in a section called logging. Okay. So if we take a look at appsettings.json file, so if we take a look at appsettings.json file, notice we have a sections with named logging, and inside that we have a nested log level. Log level object. We will discuss log levels in details in our upcoming videos. In addition to reading the logging related configuration, information from logging section, it also adds these three logging providers. It also adds these three logging providers. Okay, in addition to reading the logging related configuration information from logging, it also adds these three logging providers: console, debug, EventSource logger. Console, debug, and EventSource logger to our application out of the box. This is the reason we are able to see the logs. This is the reason we are able to see the logs displayed in this console window, and in the debug output window in Visual Studio. In addition to these three logging providers, console, debug, and event source, there are several other built-in logging providers provided by ASP.NET Core out of the box. As we already discussed these different logging providers, these different logging providers allows us to send logs to different destinations. For example, console display logs on the console window. If you have Windows operating system and you want to log the messages to the Windows EventLog, then use EventLog provider. Similarly, Azure App Service File provider logs messages to the Azure App Service File, and similarly this provider log messages to log messages to Azure, log messages to Azure app service blob, app service services blob, services blob storage. In addition to these built-in logging providers provided by ASP.NET Core, we also have several third-party. We also have several third-party logging providers. We have, for example, nlog, Elma, Serilog, etc. In our upcoming video in this series, we will discuss how to log warnings and exceptions from our application to a file using this third-party logging provider, nlog. This is just an introduction to logging capabilities in ASP.NET Core. There is lot more to learn. We will cover most of the logging concept in our upcoming videos in this series. So please stay tuned. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.